One of the most remarkable aspects of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is its unique history. Throughout the world, great stories from faithful church members have only added to that history. This program shares some of these incredible stories of faith, perseverance, hope, and inspiration. You're listening to Legacy. I'm your host, Nathan Wright. A major part of getting the message of the restoration out to the modern world is recordings, audio and video. You're hearing us today because of recording technology. Joining me today is Andrew Thomas, who works in the Church History Library. Andrew, welcome to Legacy. And if you take a minute just to introduce yourself, tell us your background and what brought you here.
Thank you. Well, I work at the Church History Library as a collections care technician. And what that entails is I mostly deal in audio. That's sort of my expertise. I do as well do some video. What my primary job is to take this media, this material, and digitize it into a digital format. And that's kind of for two reasons. It's so that we can help to preserve the audio, but also make it more available. Sometimes I joke with people when they come through the tour over at the Church History Library. We have wire recordings, and I sometimes will hand one to someone and say, if you came in and asked for a specific recording and I handed this to you, you'd probably, think it was some kind of a fishing line or something. So yeah, it's to make it more available, but preserve it as well.
So how did you get interested in doing this? Do you have a history background and an audio-visual background?
Yeah, sort of. I mean, with the older formats, it's kind of interesting. I've always been, I guess you could say, obsessed with sound. One of my earliest memories is making a rubber band guitar. And, I noticed that when you pulled the rubber band, the tone would go higher, and the note would go higher, and the sound would get louder. And then when you loosened it, it would go lower and the volume would drop. And so that's, quite honestly, that was one of my first memories of having an interest in audio and sound. And then, I got into playing music, studied classical guitar for quite a while, and, got into the fretboard theory and all that kind of stuff. And then I got into recording around that same time. Started out with, a 1/4-inch tape and half-inch tape, and then, I even used wire recordings. My grandfather had a wire recorder, and I remember him pulling it out and playing. I think he'd go down to the train station and he'd record trains as they'd go by. So we have a bunch of wire recordings of trains going.
Sound effects, great.
Yeah, exactly. So he was kind of into that as well, and my father was a big influence with getting into audio, and then I started getting into building instruments, and that kind of dovetailed with the whole sound aspect of my interest.
And you ended up in a library. So
yes.
Somewhere along the line you must have learned some archiving techniques.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I learned actually a lot from the people I work with, Christine Marin and some other people. But yeah, I've got sort of a background with more mixing music and working in the studio setting and things like that, and then learning sort of the art of taking care of these older formats as well.
Excellent. So tell us what types of recordings that the church has. I guess probably from the very beginning we've kept something of all types. I don't know that for sure, but tell us a little bit about what kinds of recordings.
Yeah, so we have all types of different formats. The oldest recording we have is the Wilford Woodruff phonograph cylinder, or wax cylinder as it's more commonly known, and that's from 1897. We have wax cylinders, we have wire recordings, we have a lot of 1/4-inch audio tape, half-inch audio tape, 2-inch, 1-inch audio tape. So we have a lot of reels. We also have a lot of different phonograph or gramophone records. Anything from, the real small 5-inch records all the way to the big 16-inch transcription discs.
Wow.
Yeah, those are fun to work with. They're made out of glass usually, and so they're very fragile.
Oh, my. So as sort of a departure from our normal routine today. We're actually going to listen to some of these recordings.
Yes.
I think this is very exciting. So let's listen to this recording of President Woodruff. Now, describe these for us.
Like I say, it's an old recording. It's kind of cool because it was recorded on March 19th, 1897, and so it was 114 years ago that this was recorded. The thing I think to remember with this wax cylinder, he recorded it when he was 90 years old. And one thing with wax cylinders, when you record, you have to really be able to project your voice to get that stylus to make a sound
to dig
cut.
in.
Yeah, to dig into that wax cylinder. And so I wanted to play just the initial original transfer, and it's just a few seconds long, just so people can kind of hear how a wax cylinder sounds. And it's kind of scratchy, and it's hard to understand some of the things. But then the second clip will be of that same audio, but restored.
Okay, let's roll it.
I bear my testimony that Judith Smith was the true prophet of God. I bear my testimony that Judith Smith was the true prophet of God, ordained of God. I bear my testimony that in the early spring of 1844, in Albany, the Father Judith Smith called the 12 apostles together, and he delivered unto them the ordinances of the church kingdom of God, and all the keys and powers that God had bestowed upon him. Prophet Joseph laid down his life for the word of God and testimony of Jesus Christ. And he will be crowned as a martyr in the presence of God and the Lamb. In all his testimony to us, the power of God was visibly manifest with the prophet Joseph. This is my testimony, spoken by myself into a talking machine on this, the 19th day of March, 1897, in the 91st year of my age, Wilfred Woodruff.
Wow, so you're right. The first one was barely intelligible.
Yeah.
And, of course, the second one was still difficult.
It is, yeah. And one of the challenges, especially with this recording, and I don't know if it's because, as I said before, with his age, if, maybe projecting his voice wasn't as easily done. But, yeah, the frequency of the noise, it tends to be in the same range as his voice. And so it's really hard when you start doing restoration work. It's kind of like peeling apart an onion. You don't want to go too deep or else it starts affecting the tone of the voice.
So describe to us the noise cancellation, or what's the best way for some old, really old recording like this, how you noise cancel. I don't understand.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting process. You use some different filters, and you want to get an idea of what the overall noise sounds like, what those frequencies, where those frequencies lie, and then it's just a matter of subtracting those frequencies. If you do it too much, it can start sounding really bad. So it's a balance. It's definitely a balance.
So how do you get a cable out of of course I'm joking, a cable out of a wax cylinder recording machine into a computer in order to edit the audio?
Well, there's a number of different ways. Some people actually use the wax player itself. Others use what they call floating styluses. And that's one of the difficulties with wax cylinders is the machines have a fixed stylus. So it's not like a record or a gramophone where it follows the groove. With a wax cylinder, it's actually set, and so if it doesn't line up there, it can start doing a lot of damage to the cylinder. So the way they transfer them now is with a floating stylus.
Okay.
So it kind of floats on the top of it.
So if what I've heard is correct, this is the oldest recording in the church.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
What are some of the other recordings you find interesting and and perhaps rare in the collection.
Yeah. A lot of people ask what wire recordings sound like. A lot of people didn't know that they could record on wire. And it's kind of interesting. Wire recordings, they're about the same thickness as a human hair, so they're very fragile to deal with, and they tend to like to tangle on themselves. It's kind of like fishing line, but metal. And so I've always liked the way that they sound. They have a higher frequency, so you don't get as much bass in the sound, but they definitely have their own sound. And so that I always like doing transfers of wires because they're a lot of fun. So
is this the same magnetic technology as magnetic tape? Is there something on the wire that...
With the wire technology, it's a magnetic technology, and so it has a recorder playback head that spools the wire as it plays back. And it was popular during the late 40s, early 50s, and then it kind of died out when magnetic tape became more available.
So we have an example of a wire recording here. Looks like it's President Hinckley's father, Bryant S. Hinckley. Is that right?
This is a recording of Bryant S. Hinckley, and it was recorded on a wire on May 13th, 1950, and it was at the Fort Lemhi Monument dedication. And it's kind of interesting. It was recorded outside. If you listen in the background, you can hear like some kids and things in the background. So it's kind of a cool...
higher frequency type things.
Yes, definitely.
Okay. All right, let's listen to this one.
I imagine that when Brigham Young projected this, he had a great idea of what the state of Deseret ought to comprehend. And I think when he came here that same year, early in April 1858, I believe Brigham Young...
Well, much clearer than the wax technology.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, and that's one of the reasons I like doing them is because they tend to have pretty good sound. Like I say, that more of the bass frequencies aren't present, but it's a clear recording.
And you have a real idea. I mean, it's of what his voice sounded like. It's not like with President Woodruff. It was like, are we sure we even have an idea of what he was like?
Yeah, and it's interesting. One thing, too, about the wire recording is it travels at a pretty high rate of speed. It goes about 3 feet per second, and there's about 1,000 feet of wire on one spool. So it
that's
really
whipping pretty fast.
Yeah, I'll actually take my tie off when we do it because I don't want to get my head sucked into the machine. So, yeah.
So tell us about preservation techniques. You have all this media. How do you keep it so it's usable? So
we have a fantastic storage unit. The main thing with keeping long-term audio preservation is temperature, moisture, and acidity. Those things can really affect audio formats. And so we keep the audio at, well, actually the audio and the video at 55 degrees and 35% humidity. So we have a very controlled storage area for this material.
I, for about 3 years, did cataloging of audiovisual material in what is called the Visual Resource Library.
Oh, cool.
And there were times when a tape that we would get from the Granite Mountain Vault, a large videotape, I would open up the case, which is airtight, and there was the air that was inside would just have this interesting smell, which to me meant this tape is deteriorating.
Yes, it could have been what's known as vinegar syndrome. If it smelled like vinegar, then yeah, that's one of the things that can occur with old film.
And so my point being is none of these things probably will last forever, and so it's difficult and very necessary to try to figure out ways best to keep them. Yeah,
and really migration, that's one of the keys of keeping this audio material to where it can be played back. And also machines. That's one thing that a lot of people forget about is the upkeep of the actual machines to play back this material, such as reel-to-reel machines and things like that. So.
And that was my next question: is there are places and museums that will have lots of these machines to play back things, but I doubt you guys want to be dependent upon those. And so
No.
you probably have, is my guess, some 2-inch audio recording type players, a 1-inch videotape machine, probably anything that
Yeah.
you have in the collection, you probably have a machine to play it on.
Yeah, and that's one of the challenges is keeping that technology alive so that we can migrate this material. So yeah, it kind of at times looks like a museum because we've got to keep all this stuff in good working order.
So let's listen to another recording.
Yeah.
I think this next one on your list is going to be a favorite of a lot of listeners. Describe this one for us.
Oh yeah. So this is Heber J. Grant, and I remember in primary learning about how he wanted to play baseball, and he practiced and practiced
And became a very good baseball player.
Yeah, became a very good baseball player. And another thing that I remember is that he always wanted to sing. And when I started working here, I often wondered if we had any recordings of him singing, and we do. And so that's what I thought we'd play here. He sings a song called "Flag Without a Stain," and this is a recording from 1938. And he actually introduces the song, and then sings a verse of it.
And what kind of medium was this recorded on?
This was recorded on what's known as an acetate gramophone.
Is that similar to an LP, or how?
Well,
for those of us who have no idea what that is,
the grooves are a little bit different. So yeah, they're also known as an instantaneous disc. So they could record right on the spot, and they're very unique because they usually don't have copies made. So
of course, I should clarify that maybe half of our listeners don't even know what an LP is. Those of us who are older understand that. Okay, let's listen to this recording of President Grant.
I have been requested to sing a song and have a record made of it, and it is a pleasure to me to sing for you "The Flag Without a Stain." O'er land and sea, over church tower and steeple, foremost in battle, proudly I reign, triumphant now o'er thee, without one stain. Oh, how I tremble when called alone to stand, but brave hearts sustain me to wave o'er the land. Oh, my America, oh, my America, proudly I wave o'er thee, sweet land of liberty.
That was great.
yeah, it's
Amazing.
fun to hear.
We hear the early stories of when he was learning to sing and how he sang hymn after hymn after hymn on the road with the fellow apostles and prophets, and how he was requested to stop quite often. But he had great intonation. You can tell that. That's amazing.
Yeah, and I think it just shows at least he was able to try it and succeed. So
He accomplished his
Yeah.
task. So, have you had any personal, interesting finds? I mean, you happen to be somewhere and you just happen upon something that is quite remarkable, or...
Yeah, I mean, that happens actually quite a bit. I came across a recording. It was a wire recording of Elder Widstow, and he was an apostle, and he explains in this recording that when he was born, his hand was attached to the side of his head, and he goes on to kind of talk about what an ordeal it was, and how his parents had to take him to a doctor and have his hand removed from the side of his head. And it was just kind of an interesting thing. I had no idea of that, and so when I heard that, it was kind of a cool thing. I've heard a number of different, there's a lot of examples of where people bring in recordings and they think it's one thing, and then we play it back and it ends up being something completely different. Sometimes those are, there's some amazing finds with those. And that was the only one I could think of right offhand.
Certainly something I'd never heard of before either. Is there best places that people can find or look for old recordings? I assume boxes with pictures and other things in the attic. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but
I'm guessing there's a lot of people out there who have great audio treasures that are just waiting to be discovered. I know for myself, we found a recording of my great grandmother talking about her experiences on her mission in Georgia, and that was really cool. That's something that, in our family, it's a treasure. Because I quite honestly, I didn't know it existed until, we found it, and then we're able to play it back. So,
excellent. Today we're talking with Andrew Thomas of the Church History Library about historic recordings, and we're listening to a few of them. This is great. If someone wants to have one of these recordings in their possession and they come into the library, what's the best way to go about that?
There's a number of different ways. If you come into the Church History Library, we actually have a room where you can listen to these clips. You can ask one of the librarians, and I believe that we can make copies of the material and get it to people that way. So
how does it work? You come in and you don't have a wire recorder sit down in front of you,
no,
is my guess.
Not. But yeah, and that's actually one of the reasons why we are doing this, is so that, we can make this available. But yeah, what would happen is you come into the room and you do a search and say you find a piece of audio that you'd like to listen to. Then you ask the staff there, and there's an audiovisual, I think they call it like the audiovisual reading room, which I don't know. I don't know how you read audiovisual stuff, but I think that's what it's called. So you go in there, and then they bring you the material, and you can listen to it there. Or like I say, I believe we also make copies for people.
Okay, you mentioned earlier these large transcription discs.
Yes.
I think we have a sample of Matthew Cowley speaking in General Conference, so let's listen to what that sounds like.
Yeah, and this is one, just to set this up, I guess I'm kind of biased towards Matthew Cowley. I served my mission in New Zealand, Wellington.
That says it all right there.
Yeah, exactly. And so I heard a lot of stories with Matthew Cowley, and this one, when I did the transfer on this one, it was just really cool because he talks about how, he had to learn the language, and so it's an interesting clip.
And he's known as a great orator, and I haven't heard the clip yet, but I expect this is probably a good example of that.
Just a very powerful speaker.
I'm reminded of President McKay's beautiful tribute to youth, the confidence he has in youth. I am personally grateful for the confidence this church had in me in my extreme youth. I was just turning 17 when I was called to go to New Zealand as a missionary. My first appointment there was to a little place called Judea, a wonderful place to go for a young missionary. The first meeting I attended in Judea, I didn't understand a word that was being said. And after the meeting, a sister who could speak English said to me, "Do you know what they said in there, what they did?" I said I couldn't understand a word. She says, "Well, you were called and sustained as the secretary of the Relief Society of the Judea branch." And I made up my mind right there and then that the Relief Society was not going to take any liberty with my time as a missionary without me knowing something about it. And so I determined to get the gift of the Maori language even if I had to work for it. And I did have to work for it. I studied 11 hours every day for several weeks. I read the Book of Mormon in Maori. My studies were punctuated with fasting and with prayer. And on my 12th Sunday, I delivered my first sermon in the Maori language. They do speak with new tongues, those who accept the call to the ministry of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.
So describe the makeup of a transcription disc.
Yeah, oftentimes they're, like I say, they're about 16 inches in diameter, and
this was the glass one?
Yes.
Oh my, okay.
Made out of glass and sometimes made out of aluminum. It depends on when they were made. But yeah, they're extremely fragile, and the speeds can fluctuate sometimes, so that can be a bit of an issue. But
that was a very good recording.
Yeah.
There was no hiss that we're used to with like cassette tape and the background noises, the echo from the hall, the people in the, you know.
You can sort of get the ambience of the room, so they definitely are very clear.
So let's move on to this next recording of Spencer W. Kimball.
Yeah, so this recording was really cool. I transferred this one, and I was told that, you know, we needed a recording of Spencer W. Kimball, and this recording was done October 1946 in the General Conference, and this was prior to when he had throat cancer, and they had to remove 1.5 of his vocal cords. And I had never heard his voice, how it sounded prior to his surgery, and so it was really a very cool thing to hear.
So the first one we have is pre-surgery from a transcription disc, and the next one we'll just go straight into is from a 1/4-inch reel-to-reel.
The work went forward. The church was organized. The Book of Mormon was printed. The revelations were given. The 12 apostles were called, and the temple in Kirtland was dedicated. And on that day, Joseph Smith and Oliver Cowdery retired to the pulpit, the veils being dropped, and there bowed in silent prayer. After rising from their knees, the Savior appeared to them, standing on the breastwork of the pulpit, and blessed them, accepting the building in His name. And so, having traced the appearance of the Redeemer from pre-existence to date, we look forward now to His second coming as He promised. This promise will be as literally fulfilled as were His many other promises. And in the meantime, we praise His holy name and serve Him and bear testimony of the divinity of His mission with the prophets through the generations. We testify with John the Baptist, who as he saw the Lord approaching to him saith, Behold the Lamb of God, which taketh away the sins of the world.
As this conference concludes, we bless you, and we bring to you the blessings of the Lord of heaven. Brethren and sisters, I know that this is the work of the Lord. You haven't come these long distances for nothing. It's to feed your souls. I know that the Lord lives, that God who was with Adam, that God who came to the banks of the Jordan River to say, This is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased, to introduce His Son to a world that was to depend so completely on Him. I know that was the God that we worship, who came on the Mount of Transfiguration and said again to those servants, Peter, James, and John, who were to carry on the work of the Lord even in their imperfections. And He said, This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. The same God we know He lives and exists, who came in the state of New York and said those same things as He had already said to the Nephites, and now said to a world that had been traveling in darkness for a long, long time, This is my beloved Son, hear ye Him. I know that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God. I know that. And I know that the gospel which we teach is the gospel of Jesus Christ. And the church to which we belong is the church of Jesus Christ. And it teaches his doctrines and his policies and his programs. And I know that if all of us will live the program as he has given it to us and will continue to give it to us, that all the blessings promised will be ours. Now God bless you, and we leave his blessings with you, with our affection, our appreciation for you, in the name of his Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Of course, it's quite a stark difference between the before and after.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
I do have to admit that it was easy to see, hear his style in the before surgery voice that we were so used to.
Yeah.
In the later years.
Yeah, and he had like I've said to a number of people, he had a powerful voice both before and after. It was, yeah, I love hearing that.
So you mentioned you're migrating as much of the old as you can to the new. What is the new?
Yeah, it's a digital format. So what we do is we record it in what's called broadcast wave, and it's the specs, I guess you could say, are 96 kilohertz, 24 bits, which CD standard is 44.1 kilohertz and 16 bits, and so it's we're capturing quite a bit more data than even what's considered, Redbook CD standard.
So you've been doing this for, you say, 7 or 8 years with the historical department. And has technology changed at all in being able to bring the recordings in and clean them up any better than previously?
Yes, definitely. In fact, there's programs and applications that we're using now that didn't really exist in a good form just a couple years ago.
Wow.
So, I mean, and that's one of the reasons I guess I should make this very clear. When we do a transfer, we keep that master file untouched. So we keep all the hisses, cracks, pops, all the blemishes in that master file, and then we make derivatives of that file, and those are the ones that we can then work on and do those things if they're needed. Perfect world, we would never have to, but
right.
That just doesn't happen. So,
what would you say is the most challenging part of what you do?
Oh, there's some weird formats that I've come across that we really needed the audio off of them. Just one I can think of offhand was a dictaphone dictate tape, and they really don't. The players to find the players that actually are still working is pretty much unheard of, and so finding new ways to play back that material, that can be a challenge. Luckily on that particular project I did succeed, and I was able to take the cassette apart and actually remove the tape and re-reel it onto another reel, and then make the transfer, change the speeds to what a dictate tape plays at, and then put it all back together so it was in its, like it had never been touched.
I think those of us from the olden days probably have each experienced a cassette tape situation similar to that. Something gets tuned up and you want to save it as best you can. And
see, and luckily with cassette tapes, because this is sometimes people ask questions about cassettes, the good thing about those is oftentimes it's a mechanical failure rather than, actual, unless you've erased the tape, then there's really nothing you can do. But oftentimes it's, the slip sheet is failing or the pressure pad's gone.
Right.
And so yeah, but it can be fun. It can be challenging, but it's in a fun way.
Speaking of fun, let's jump down to track 10. We have a recording of LeGrand Richards in General Conference.
I had a young missionary come in to visit with me as he returned from the Argentine. I knew his people back in Washington, and He had been kept over to help train some of the other missionaries until he'd been away from home for 3 years. And I said, Craig, do you feel like it was a waste of time to be in the mission field, that you ought to have been home getting your education, getting ready to settle down? He said, now listen, Bishop, if the brethren want to make me happy, just let them load me on the plane in the morning and send me back to the Argentine. You can't buy that kind of feeling in the hearts of young people with money. The Lord who creates the feelings of the human breast is the only one who can put that kind of faith into the hearts of his people. Is this red now? Is it my time to quit? I think they got the red button on here, and I mustn't indulge on the other man's time. Brethren, after all the missionary service I've had, I wouldn't want to raise a boy and not have him go on a mission for his good, and because I think we owe so much to the world to share with them the truths of the gospel.
Of course, that was in reference to the little red light saying, Brother Richards, it's time for you to sit down. So,
yeah.
that's great.
Yeah, I love Elder LeGrand Richards. He had a great sense of humor, but was also a very powerful speaker as well.
And that's the beauty of these recordings, is these brothers are gone from this life, but we can still hear exactly how they sounded and get a feel for their testimonies.
Yeah, and I think it makes a difference. I mean, for me personally, it affects me a lot more when I actually can hear, because I mean, if I read what I just heard, it wouldn't really, I'd read it and say, oh, but by hearing it, it's just a different feeling. It's powerful.
What type of recordings is the history department interested in if someone has something?
Pretty much anything that's related to church history, I guess, is the short answer. There are parameters that the material has to meet, and I think if anybody has, material that they think that the church might be interested in, I would say to definitely contact the Church History Library. There's a couple ways to do that. You can call directly. You can go to their website, and they actually have 2 links at the bottom of the web page. One of them says Ask a Librarian, and the other link says How do I give gifts or donations? And that's really the best way. And then we have people who can assess that material and see what to do.
All right. We're talking today with Andrew Thomas of the Church History Library and listening to some great historic recordings. And this is really fun. So perhaps someone has some cherished family recordings. They don't think probably it will matter to the Church History Library or whatever. What's the best way to keep those and keep them a long time? I
would say if they're on formats that are on their way out, or possibly formats that are already dead, I would say the best way is to get to migrate those and get a digital copy, and then really migration is the key. Some people have asked me, well, I've got all my stuff on CDs, so I'm all right, and I tell them, well, I would definitely check those about every 3 to 5 years, and then there's other things too that can really prolong the life of those types of recordings. One thing I say is if you make a CD, make a bunch of copies and give them to family members. I remember talking to one person, and they said, oh, I've made 10 copies, so I'm pretty sure that, at least out of those 10, I'll have one that will still work. And I said, where are you keeping them? And he says, oh, I keep them all together on my... I said, oh, what if you have a fire or something, then all your copies are gone. So that's why I usually say, CDs are cheap to burn, and I would say make copies and give them to family members, and definitely don't put those sticky labels on the top. I've had so many discs fail because of those, because what starts happening is they'll delaminate and pull the reflective surface off of the disc, and then you're left with a coaster pretty much. So
Then you just have history and not historical recordings.
Exactly. So
What is the life expectancy of a regular old CD?
It's hard to say because they've put them through, aging tests and things like that, and a lot of times they're inconclusive. You'll have some companies that say, "Oh, our discs will last, 100 years," and there's, I don't know. It's hard because a lot of people think that the burnt discs are the same as pressed discs, and they're completely different. The burnt discs are much more volatile because it's just dye that's being changed by a laser, whereas with stamped or pressed discs, it's pressed into the plastic and then they put a reflective surface over it. And so some people will say, well, I have CDs that I purchased a long time ago and they're fine, but I've had some of these ones that I've burnt fail, and really that's the reason. So I would say, a 5-year cycle. That's what I do for my own collection, at least.
Good advice. We heard the before and after of the President Wilford Woodruff recording. You have some examples here of some before and after fixes that you've worked on.
Yes. So this first one, this is of David O. McKay, and this was a gramophone that was it was cracked in a number of pieces, and it was like that, way back when. So what I had to do is piece it back together like a puzzle, and there's certain ways that you have to do that. You have to use a special, well, it's kind of like a clay, but not really, to hold the disc in place while you make that transfer. And luckily with this one, all the pieces were there, and the cracks were in such a way that it wasn't detrimental to the playback. It didn't make the stylus jump around. That's one of the most difficult things, is if you can't get it to transfer correctly. So I transferred this one, and the initial transfer came out really good. So we can listen to this first part, and this is the initial transfer, and you'll hear all the cracks and where those cracks were, and the stylus was hitting the cracks and making a noise.
Okay, and then we'll go into the other one.
Yeah.
Family life, an ideal family life, is really a touch of heaven on earth. A family life, an ideal family life, is really a touch of heaven on earth.
Wow. Well done.
Yeah, and so that kind of restoration work's actually not as bad as some. I'm not very good at putting puzzles back together, but the initial transfer, I was lucky because it sounded pretty decent. So what I had to do is just go in and isolate those noises and remove them from the frequencies in the signal. So
the high little pop things you could just assign a frequency or whatever to, and they're gone.
And this one I did by hand. So some of the cracks, they were long enough that I actually had to go in and use something called spectral repair. So I had to kind of repair where those cracks were. If you listen in the first one, you can actually hear the sound kind of drop out whenever those cracks occur. And so trying to mesh those two together so that it sounds natural can be pretty tough, but I think it's worth it once you hear the result. So
definitely. And the second example we have is just a talk from President Harold B. Lee, which is a before and after with this really loud, obnoxious 60 hertz cycle hum, and we'll see what it sounds like after the fact.
And I'm sure a lot of people will hear this and say, oh yeah, I've heard this one is actually really bad though. And this one was a challenge. I often, some people have said, how do you do this? And I tell them, well, we have a way of looking at the waveform, and it's almost like looking for misspelled words or, correcting a paper, except you're doing it with audio. And so you're looking for that noise and where it lies, and then you just go in and you have to keep pulling the layers off of that noise until you get to a point where you can't hear it. So that's what I did with this one.
I come to you tonight with a feeling of dependence, for hoping that my poor words. I come to you tonight with a feeling of dependence, for hoping that my poor words might be clothed upon with. Wow.
So yeah,
We're
big
talking
difference
about a
there.
before and after there.
Yeah. Yeah, and that one was pretty tough because what I had to work with was not very good. In fact, that one actually, it fell out of the 60 hertz cycle, and it was bleeding into some of the other frequencies, and so but the strongest one you hear there is the 60 hertz cycle.
The problem that I, at least standing outside, not knowing really what it's all about, is if you're taking things away, there's things that you perhaps want to remain that
yes.
you are in danger of taking out.
Yes, definitely, and that's where it gets into that. So with the original recording of this, it has the blemishes, the hums, and the things like that. And so the cool thing with that one, though, is you can actually hear somebody drop something, and so there's still a lot you can do with removing just the noise and keeping the stuff that you want. But it can be a challenge at times. And certain noises, there's nothing you can do with them. That's why some recordings, no matter how hard you try to make them sound good, they just will not sound good. And that recording's kind of funny because if you turn it up really loud, I can still hear the hum, even on the cleaned one. So it's maybe I shouldn't say that, but yeah, it's still there, but it's a lot less noticeable.
A lot more subdued. Very good. What are some of the more requested recordings that you're able to make available to patrons? Most popular, say. You
know what? Some of the most popular, I mean, obviously General Conference is really popular, and we have recordings of General Conference from, April 1936, I guess, to now. So General Conference, also, music in the spoken word. One of the things that a lot of people have asked me is, do you have any recordings of J. Golden Kimball? That was actually when we had our open house tour of the Church History Library, and luckily I had a clip there of him, but that was one of the I guess, things that people wanted to hear and were asking about, and we did have one. So,
and I think we have it here today, so
yeah.
Let's listen to that one. I think this will be a first for me.
It's pretty funny, and it's good, though.
You people, the way you look around, feel around, I wonder if you think I'm old. I'm very glad that I'm not as old as I feel. I am thankful every minute, nearly every minute, that I'm alive. I'm better informed about life than death. I appreciate, more than I can express, President Grant's kindness towards me to permit me and to stand in this pulpit and declare humbly, prayerfully, before God, that Joseph Smith is a prophet of God, that Jesus is the Christ, that God is our Father. You take that from me, you have stripped me from my whole life. Oh, I love this work. And the building's been wonderfully good to me, and they've been patient. God knows that. But they never endured it. Because I have said things that I'm sorry I said, but I couldn't take it back. My conclusion to you, good people, learn the love of God, but without faith, what can you do? And all of us that live for it can have faith. I pray the Lord to bless all you brethren, all you authorities. Father once discouraged Heber C. Kimball. I don't know whether any of you will be saved. If there is any of you saved, I'll be more surprised than anybody else. Lord bless you, amen.
Amen, Brother Kimball. That's great fun.
Yeah.
I think as one of the last examples today, we'll go to your track number 9. This is Marion G. Romney in a general conference in 1967.
Yes, yeah. This was the year that they started using color television, and so they started filming in color. And to do that, they had to use these really hot lights, that would just glare down on everybody up on the stand. And I really liked what Marion G. Romney said at this conference.
Okay, let's listen.
Funny, but...
Brothers and sisters, as I've sat here on the stand through 7 sessions under these intense lights for color television, I must confess that they have worked in me a change of allegiance. I have always felt that Daniel was the hero of the book of Daniel, but I admit now that my sympathy is running strongly to the 3 Hebrew children who were thrown into the fiery furnace.
Something else that's kind of interesting in that clip is that he talks about there being 7 sessions. So, yeah, they used to actually have 7 sessions of General Conference. So
I remember the Friday afternoon ones when
Yes.
I was in high school, but even then, I think it was only 5 sessions or something. So, anyway, some great information, some wonderful insights that gives us a real feel for these historical figures in the church. We've been discussing historical audio recordings today. We've had Andrew Thomas with us from the Church History Library. Andrew, thank you very much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
As we finish today's episode of Legacy, let's listen to one more historical recording from President J. Reuben Clark.
I should like now to talk about that question of debt a little more. I shall say nothing new. Everybody knows the things I shall mention. My only excuse for making them is that sometimes some of us forget what should in wisdom be remembered. It is a rule of our financial and economic life in all the world that interest is to be paid on borrowed money. May I say something about interest? Interest never sleeps, nor sickens, nor dies. It never goes to the hospital. It works on Sundays and holidays. It never takes a vacation. It never visits nor travels. It takes no pleasure. It is never laid off work nor discharged from employment. It never works on reduced hours. It never has short crops nor droughts. It never pays taxes. It buys no food. It wears no clothes. It is unhoused and without home, and so has no repairs, no replacements, no shingling, plumbing, painting, or whitewashing. It has neither wife, children, father, mother, nor kinfolk to watch over and care for. It has no expense of living. It has neither weddings, nor births, nor deaths. It has no love, no sympathy. It is as hard and soulless as a granite cliff. Once in debt, interest is your companion every minute of the day and night. You cannot shun it or slip away from it. You cannot dismiss it. It yields neither to entreaties, demands, or orders. And whenever you get in its way or cross its course or fail to meet its demands, it crushes you. So much for the interest we pay. Whoever borrows should understand what interest is. It is with him every minute of the day and night.